Following military retirement, General Raduege served as chairman of the Deloitte Center for Cyber Innovation and managing director for Cyber Risk Services for Deloitte & Touche LLP. Did I say that correctly? He co-chaired the Center for Strategic and International Studies Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th presidency and was a senior advisor to the Task Force on Cybersecurity for the 45th presidency. He also served as a special government employee within the Department of Homeland Security on the Board of Governors of the United States Organization and as managing partner of the Ridgelane LP Information Technology Practice. General Raduege currently serves on the Board of Trustees at Capital University as a senior advisor to the Air Force Association's Cyber Patriot program, on the Ohio Governor's Cyber Ohio Advisory Board, and as a senior cybersecurity advisor to the president of the University of Maryland Global Campus. Throughout his career, he has worked at executive levels in communications, command and control, emergency preparedness, cyberspace and cybersecurity, continuity of government, and in satellite space information and network operations. Please welcome General Harry Raduege.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. You did a magnificent job with that. That was pretty lengthy, so is it time for me to just take questions now? Are there any questions about any of that? I know I have some. No, but thank you very much. And you pronounced every one of those tough words accurately, and at the top of the list is my name. So thank you. Sometimes that always isn't the case, so thank you. Well, it's wonderful to be here with all of you today in our hometown of Colorado Springs. My wife and I just celebrated our 51st wedding anniversary yesterday, and my colleague there, Forrest Senti, and his wife just celebrated their first anniversary yesterday. So when we were having our 50th, they were getting married. So it's kind of a neat little thing that we shared together. Let me just say this is a very sad day for me and for our nation. I had the pleasure of, and the honor and privilege of working with General Colin Powell in the Pentagon. And the last time there at the Pentagon, it was when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I was on his staff, on the Joint Staff. And so I got to brief him fairly regularly at the morning staff meetings and all with Desert Shield and Desert Storm that was happening. And he was just, he was a magnificent man. After his retirement from the military, I was in one of my positions as manager of the National Communication System. And General Powell and I used to co-chair meetings together of the National Communication System, and that was with meetings with the President of the United States. So I told my wife when she was going to be meeting General Powell for the first time at a gala activity up in Washington, D.C., I said, Julie, you're going to notice one thing immediately with this gentleman, and it's when you talk with him, he will look you in the eyes. And there will be plenty of people pulling on his sleeve to introduce themselves and to get his attention. And as long as he's having a conversation with you, he will always respect you and he will look you in the eye until that conversation is over. And sure enough, General Powell came over to us. We started talking, and it was exactly what happened. People started pulling on his sleeve, and he locked on to Julie, talked to her until the conversation was over. But a magnificent American. I'm sad to see, frankly, the way he went. He was vaccinated, and the fact that he fell to COVID, this scourge upon our world today, is just it's extra sad for me. So thank you for allowing me that little piece of time. I just had to point out, and my good friend and patriot, General Powell. Well, frankly, you chose a good topic, because October of every year is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So how many knew that, by the way? Yeah, this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Isn't that something? And, you know, I've had the privilege of working in what we've referred to as cyber and cybersecurity now for a little over 20 years. That's when it really all kind of started as a recognized term of cyber and cybersecurity. And cyber issues today are right at the top of everything we frankly do. And let me explain that. We really have defined 5 operational domains. Now, back when I joined the military, we had 3 recognized operational domains: air, land, and sea. That's where we operated. And lo and behold, right here, because of Colorado Springs, and back in the 80s, space became the 4th recognized operational domain. And then what has happened here within the last several years is cyberspace has become the 5th operational domain. What makes cyberspace, and frankly cybersecurity, so important is the fact that it flows through all 4 of those other domains. It's common to every one of them, because every one of those domains uses cyber, computers, etc. in some way. Now, over my years of working in cyber, on the front lines, frankly, when I was on active duty, and now in sort of a side way, but still actively involved in keeping up with what all is going on. And frankly, there's a lot going on, and it's evolving every day. Now, I have defined in my own mind 4 different cyber intrusions, okay? 4 different types. And the first type is cyber attacks. And that really also involves sabotage. Now let me just give you a couple examples of what I put into the bucket that is cyber attacks. First off, back in 2010, several nations that were very sophisticated attacked Iran. And you might recall it being the Stuxnet attack, because Iran was developing and enriching uranium. They said for peaceful purposes, but they were actually enriching it for nuclear reasons, for weaponry. And so a cyber attack went in, spun the centrifuges out of control, and actually destroyed a part and set their whole program back. So that was Stuxnet. That was definitely an attack. Also, in 2012, Saudi Aramco, that's the Saudi Arabian oil company, was attacked by someone or some nation. And think about this if you're a business owner. They actually attacked 30,000 computers of Saudi Aramco and wiped them clean. Now think about that, coming to work and having everything wiped clean. The second category that I would mention of cyber attacks is cyber espionage. And one of the ones I recall from the beginning was DoD classified networks were breached by hackers linked to Russia back in 2008. And then there was an attack called DoQ that was espionage, that in the 2011 time frame, people got into our industrial control systems and actually stole all kind of information on our industrial control systems for all kinds of things in our nation and beyond. The third type of cyber attack that I would define is data breaches and theft, just theft of information. Your theft of your personal identifiable information, which gets right to your heart. Target, Adobe, Facebook, TJ Maxx, Home Depot are only a few of the ones that had massive amounts of data that has been stolen over the years. And most recently, you've maybe heard of something called SolarWinds. Okay, that was where software was compromised during the March to June 2020 timeframe. And the Russian government, with linked hackers, compromised 9 federal agencies and 100 private sector groups for much of the year 2020. And we didn't know about that for months. Think about that. They were in there and operating for months. But the Russians stole information on U.S. sanctions policy, on counterintelligence investigations, on methods for catching Russian hackers, and even our nation's response to COVID-19. Isn't that an interesting series of theft that was conducted by the Russians? Now, 18,000 customers might have downloaded this malicious software we call malware. And interestingly, General Nakasone, and if you don't know that name, he's the 4-star general that is in charge of the National Security Agency and the U.S. Cyber Command. It's 2 of the most powerful organizations that our government has. General Nakasone thinks that this SolarWinds attack was a real turning point for our nation. And he said a foreign adversary was trying to do harm to our nation. So he puts that in that kind of a category. So we imposed tough sanctions on Russia, and the Russians now are also infiltrating the European government networks in the same way. Now, the fourth area of cyber intrusions, the last one that I have defined by myself, is cybercrime. Okay, and that's criminal activity that is increasing today. Ransomware is malicious software that threatens to publish or blocks access to data or a computer system, usually by encrypting it themselves, and then until the victim organization pays a ransom fee to get their own information back. Okay? So often this carries a deadline of you have to do that. But when your data all goes out and you can't get to it, and then somebody says you got to pay for it to get it back, that's what's going on in ransomware. And today, ransomware, and just recently, has grown to be the #1 cybersecurity issue facing our nation. And it's been also referred to as the cybersecurity scourge of 2021. Now, let me give you some examples of recent 2021 ransomware attacks. Pipelines, okay? Colonial Pipeline is the most famous. It was shut down for 5 days of distribution of 45% of diesel, gas, and jet fuel on the East Coast of the United States. And that happened in May of this year, 2021, just 5 months ago. And the first high-profile attack on U.S. national infrastructure. Okay? And the company, Colonial Pipeline, paid $5 million to gain access again to their data. In the food area, 1 month later, June, just 4 months ago, JBS, the world's largest meat processing company in North America and Australia, was attacked, and ransomware was demanded, and they paid $11 million to get their information back and have access to it. Software companies also, Kaseya, just 3 months ago, in July of 2021, hackers seized companies of as many as 800 to 1,500 small to medium-sized businesses. That's really striking home for small and medium businesses, which there's a lot of them here in our Colorado Springs and our nation. Revo asked for $70 million for a universal decryptor to unlock this data for Kaseya. Healthcare industry has also been attacked. Public schools are being attacked. In the United States, the entire K through 12 school districts have been disrupted. And that comes from a quote from Congressman Jim Langevin, a Democrat from Rhode Island who I've had the pleasure of working with for years. As a matter of fact, he was one of the co-chairs on the Cybersecurity Commission for the 44th president that was noted earlier as part of my background also. Consulting firms have been attacked. Specifically, I know of Accenture, very well-known name, big organization. Public water, wastewater plants in Maine were attacked. And treasuries, for example, even in Brazil, have been attacked. So ransomware attacks have literally surged. And they've been around for decades, but they have surged specifically over the last 2 years. And attempted ransomware attacks per month in June of 2020 were 18 million. In June of 2021, 1 year later, that 18 million went to 80 million. So 4.5 times. So that's where the trend's going on ransomware attacks in our nation and beyond. So also, it's due to people probably working more now from home than ever before, and the ransomware attacks are coming at them. Now the problem, or one of the problems, is the fact that only about 25% of ransomware attacks are even reported. A lot of times people just pay the ransom and don't want it publicized. Baltimore paid more than $18 million to recover from a 2019 attack, but they suffered through weeks of hobbled services, all to avoid paying a ransom of less than $100,000. If companies, and what this is saying is they paid $18 million to recover to avoid paying $100,000. People are now starting to rethink, you know, maybe we ought to pay the ransom. And this is happening. It used to be when this first started, the FBI said, don't pay the ransom. You know, we'll catch these people. But when it shuts your business down and you lose huge amounts of money or safety to people and health to people, you know, especially like hospitals. Matter of fact, there's already been a death attributed to ransomware at an Atlanta hospital in 2019. An infant there died because it didn't have the necessary information to provide the infant with life-saving procedures. So if company's data isn't backed up, the company could go under. And so there's ways of defending yourself against ransomware, and I'm not going to go into all that today. The most damaging and prolific cyber ransomware gangs operate on Russian territory and with the Kremlin with their approval. In June of 2021, President Biden actually warned President Putin not to attack our 16 defined critical infrastructures. What's interesting, and one thing that we're working here in Colorado Springs, we're working with the Congress because Guess what is not a critical infrastructure defined by the Department of Homeland Security? Space. Space. So it's almost saying, don't touch our 16 critical infrastructures, but have at it with space. So this is dangerous. We're actually working the legislation now to try and change that and get space added as the 17th critical infrastructure. Red teams are the best at protecting organizations internally. And ransomware attacks are now thought of as a national security issue, not just criminal activity. And that has pushed it just recently into a whole other domain. And that was a quote by General Paul Nakasone, and I mentioned to you before, he's the Director of National Security Agency, Commander of U.S. Cyber Command. He said it's now national security and not just criminal activity. What does that say? National security he can engage. And we can engage our military capability. And it's awesome. I worked it from the beginning and I stay up to date. So we're calling out countries now. We're considering imposing cost of damages against people when we catch them. And Chris Inglis is now his good friend. He now is the first National Cyber Director. He works in the White House. He was just Senate confirmed not too long ago. But he said the U.S. government should be prepared to fire cyber bullets in response to significant hacking attacks as part of a comprehensive strategy to dissuade adversaries. So it's gone from criminal activity now into national security issue, and that is a significant point for our nation. Now, what I'd like to do now, that's sort of cybersecurity with just hitting a few, what I call 4 major areas, and concentrating a little bit on the criminal activity involved with ransomware, which with some specific examples that you're reading about in your newspapers now, and there's more to come. But I wanted to also give you an idea of this National Cybersecurity Center that is operating right out there on Nevada Avenue. And you've probably seen it. And so I actually have a presentation keyed up here, and hopefully, with no practice, I'm going to know which button to push as we go forward. So this is a quick presentation on National Cybersecurity Center. I'm going to get through this quickly so that we can have time for our Q&A period. Okay, there's a picture of the National Cybersecurity Center, at least part of it. I took that picture about a year ago when I was given the honor and privilege of being named the Chief Executive Officer. And so I walked out of the building one night so very, very inspired. And it was 6 or 6:30, and the Colorado blue sky was looking at me. And we just had our brand new sign put up and lighted. You can see it when you drive by on Nevada at night. Our building sits back quite a ways, but you know the best thing? We got a lot of parking. Yeah. There's a lot of parking there. And why is that important? Because the building over here on the right, that side is UCCS. And so we have a great partnership with UCCS. Now for some of you folks that have been around Colorado Springs for a while, this building is about 135,000 square feet. Only about 20% of it right now has been built out. But originally it was a TRW, Minuteman missile, stage 3 production facility. Okay, so it's a beautiful facility, and we've got a few repairs for a building that old, but that's all part of a 5-phase program of improving this building. We've completed phase 1. We have funding for phase 2 and phase 3 funding. We have phase 2 and phase 3 funding. As a matter of fact, if materials weren't so delayed right now, we already would have started with the University of Colorado Springs portion being built out. So we're waiting for the materials, but they still promise us that that phase 2 will be complete by the end of this year, which we're very much looking forward to. So we have a very strong relationship with UCCS. Now here's the mission of the National Cybersecurity Center, and Kristen actually did a great job of kind of describing it at the beginning, but let me just highlight the fact that we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and that we are serving the nation and our community with both public and private organizations and individuals through training, education, and research. Those are our primary reasons for existence. And you'll notice here, there's a picture of Governor Hickenlooper, because I go back far enough with the governor, back in 2016. Prior to that time, he had taken a trip to Israel and seen a lot of really great cybersecurity protection and capability there that the Israelis were using in defending their nation. And so he came back to Colorado and said, why can't we build something that's along those lines, something that would help? And so we started discussions on that, and I was privileged. I was one of the first ones that was involved in those discussions back in 2016 at the University of Colorado Springs, at the boardroom. And so we started talking about it, and lo and behold, in 2017, the governor signed the act that brought the NCC into existence. And Forrest Senti, who is sitting here with me at our table, was one of the first ones to when the doors opened in 2018. So this has only been around for 3 years, but we're making some pretty doggone good progress. But Forrest, who celebrated his first wedding anniversary yesterday, is our Vice President of Operations and all programs, except for the Space ISAC, and I'm going to tell you about that here in a minute. So, as Christian mentioned earlier, we've got 4 major programs that we concentrate on there. Cybersecurity for state leaders, and I'm going to explain that to you because that is something we are very, very proud of. We actually have support given to us, and we are providing training for state legislators and their staffs. So that's senators and congressional members in all 55 states and 5 territories. And so that's significant. And so they actually tune into us, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about that. But that's putting the National Cybersecurity Center into national prominence. We also have the National Cybersecurity Center Student Alliance. We are very much involved in education, and I'm going to be covering some of that at the K through 20 levels, and even into adult refresh training is what we're calling it. The Space ISAC. An ISAC is an Information Sharing Analysis Center. I first started working with ISACs back in early 2000, actually in 1998, because the first ISAC was banking and finance. Today it's financial services ISAC. So it's all the financial institutions get together and they share information and analyze information. Even though they compete, this is good for the overall health of the industry. The second ISAC that I found was the telecommunications ISAC. And why I mention those was because I was familiar with them in 1998, but as Christian mentioned in my bio, 9/11 attacks happened, and I was responsible for putting the Pentagon communications and command and control globally back together again. The Pentagon burned for 3.5 days, I might add, But with my national level hat, the National Communication System, that was the one I used to co-chair with Secretary of State Powell. We had to put back and reprioritize 5.5 million voice and data circuits that were down throughout New York City. That included the financial sector, the stock and bond market, everything. And so you could tell that I became very big fans of the banking and finance ISAC and the telecommunications ISAC, because I needed both of them and all the members to help with restoring not only our banking and finance, but also telecommunications. So the Space ISAC was only formed, this is another surprise, was only formed in January of 2020. And I'm going to show you the membership because it's gaining in popularity and it's something that is really needed. And we house the Space ISAC because we're neutral territory, and we also are the operational arm of the Space ISAC, and I'll explain more about that momentarily. Also, we have a fourth program called Secure Smart Cities. We're actually trying to decide where there might be a best way to put our resources at making Colorado Springs a center of excellence in a certain area. Maybe that's autonomous vehicles, which is a program that is handled by UCCS, autonomous vehicles. Maybe we could do something with autonomous security to support autonomous vehicles. Maybe it's something with water, with securing water. Maybe it's something with securing the electric power grid. So we're trying to figure out a best way and a best program to put Colorado Springs as a center of excellence for a certain area that can help our nation. Now, cybersecurity for state leaders. I mentioned that was one of our programs that we're so proud of. Actually, I want to point out the fact that we get the money to do this from Google. And they pay a lot of money to allow us to help teach. And by the way, we are apolitical. The National Cybersecurity Center is as long as I'm there, we're always going to be apolitical. We're not taking sides with anything. But there are so many things in cyber hygiene that we can teach state legislators and lots of people, frankly. So this is the way we do it. We have two different ways of doing it. Through live training, we actually have a studio in our NCC. And so Forrest is one of our star presenters to all the legislators around, and in other ways, webinars, podcasts, all kind of things that we do in getting the word out and also educating the population. We also have, so live training, we actually travel to the state. If they want us there, we will come, and we conduct little seminars, discussion groups. Sometimes the governor, lieutenant governor, chief information officer, chief information security officers, they gather in, and we have great discussions, which folks at the NCC like Forrest lead for us. Or we can do it through our studio if folks feel more comfortable, or it's just easier for them to conduct online type services, much of which we're doing here today. Am I pointing to the right place? I'm pointing to the people who are out in video land who might be tuned in. So we do that also at the National Cybersecurity Center. Now, here's live training, and this is Maddie Gullickson. She is actually here. She is in Nebraska. And so she's conducting this training in Nebraska on site, but she gets tremendous benefit and support from our team at the NCC, where we pull in all kind of pre-recorded messages from the governor, we coordinate all of that, put it all together, so it's a very meaningful, discussion about cybersecurity with the legislators. Now here it is when we do it from our studio, and you'll see Forrest back there sitting in the tall chair, and Maddie right next to him. And then we have our production crew up front. You can see various laptops and computers as they pull in all the various feeds, whether they be live or pre-recorded, so it makes a fantastic presentation and sets up wonderful discussion for the state legislators and their staffs. And I know it's probably hard from the back to see these pictures, but here are pictures of folks that have presented and made themselves known. Governors, lieutenant governors, chief information security officers, chief information officers, all kind of leaders that want to make it known and add their support for cybersecurity as an important area. Now, we also just launched a couple days ago a new initiative called our Colorado Cybersecurity Resource Center. And this is a capability that people who are hacked or who think ahead and want to know more information about how to keep from being hacked or what procedures to take against a ransomware attack, how to better prepare yourself, can come to our Cyber Resource Center and gain valuable information about that. And so we had a soft launch of this capability in September, and then this month, we've gone into full launch. But it's a one-stop shop for resource, for cyber resources, for local jurisdictions, school districts, and the resources are influenced by the whole of state working group. And are focused on creating simple and accessible steps to improving Colorado's cybersecurity posture. And you'll notice that, well, some of the key features here, and I'm reading a bit for those who might not be able to read carefully, it's going to feature up-to-date free resources, access to webinars and best practices, templates and tools for implementing those best practices, as well as network of peers for ongoing support. We have a number to help direct folks to the best contacts for various resources, as well as support during incidents. So, if you connect with this Colorado Cyber Resource Center, you can ask questions, you can gain information, and you can also gain information about if you're attacked, for example, who's the best organization, activity, based on the attack that you should be contacting. So it's not a 24/7, 365 operations center. We don't have the staffing to do that, but this is the next best thing. It's a one-stop shop on how can I get the information and who should I call. Now, this is our National Cybersecurity Center Student Alliance, another one of our major programs. You'll see here that we've had some good success, even during COVID years, you know, with Colorado K-12 Cyber Initiative. NCC trained over 1,000 students in 2020. We are a Cyber Patriot Center of Excellence. That's a program put on by the Air Force Association, and they reach out to all high schools and middle schools across the entire nation. There is a competition every year, and we crown a national champion, five-member team, as our national champion in cybersecurity. So we're teamed with them as a center of excellence. We now have an adult reskilling program in pilot, and it's given out more than 100 certificates. We're just getting this off the ground to seniors who would like to know more about how to keep themselves protected with their laptops, etc., because it's hard to do business and live these days without having some sort of digital connectivity. You know, there's some people now that are starting to refuse taking a check, you know, I mean, so of course you got to mail it and all that kind of stuff. So But we directly teach in 3 different school districts now, directly teach. We go there. And Colorado is providing hands-on cybersecurity education also. Now, the 4th area I'm going to talk about today is the Space ISAC. And as I mentioned, this stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We only started this in January of 2020. But I want to show you what we built in that short time frame during pandemic time. First off, the mission of the Space ISAC is to facilitate collaboration across the global space industry to enhance our global space industry. That's an important part. To enhance our ability to prepare for and respond to vulnerabilities, incidents, and threats, to disseminate timely and actionable information among member entities, and to serve as the primary communications channel for the sector with respect to this information. So this is kind of a basic statement of what ISACs do within their organizational element, whether it's financial services, whether it's energy, whether it's healthcare, we got space, okay? So I know this has got to be hard to read back there, because this is the Space ISAC community. Down the left side, you'll see that the organizations that are already part of the Space ISAC are in the areas of launch, communications, space vehicles, space systems engineering, payload designers, cybersecurity, cloud, and data processing. Okay, so the folks that are already members of the Space ISAC come from all of those various space communities. That's powerful. Over on the right-hand side are our partner agencies, and you'll see a lot of familiar logos there, like NASA, like National Security Agency, like U.S. Space Force. It's all of those big activities. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, National Reconnaissance Organization, NRO, they're all part of our partner agencies. They're all signed up. And then in the middle is where there's a meeting of industry here on the left-hand side with those communities I mentioned, and the right-hand side, which are the federal activities and organizations that depend on the information that can be analyzed and shared that comes from the Space ISAC. And you can see there that we concentrate at the Space ISAC on threats, incidents, and vulnerabilities. And it comes together at the NCC. Oh, let me just point out also, along the bottom, I mentioned this was global because ESA, that's the European Space Agency. The next acronym there is the Japanese Space Agency. And the third one that's listed here is the German Space Agency equivalent. And there's more organizations that are part of that. So this, in fact, is already global in size. Now, here's the founding board members. You can see these are very familiar names. The 2 most recent organizations that joined is Microsoft and L3 Harris. But founding members, Northrop Grumman, MITRE, SES, Space Dynamics Lab, Parsons Aerospace, UCCS, Kratos, Booz Allen Hamilton, Lockheed Martin, Johns Hopkins, Applied Research Lab, Purdue University. So that's a pretty impressive list of founding members of the Space ISAC. Now we have general membership also, where folks that might not have the kind of resources that these folks have, but here's a sampling of some of our general membership. So you'll see a lot of organizations there that you'll also recognize, like Raytheon and Boeing. And so all of these folks now are part of our space ISAC, and we keep growing all the time in membership. And that concludes my presentation. I think I'm pretty close to being on time to be able to take questions. And how do we want to handle that?
So it's a small room. I think if people just want to raise their hand, and then if they'll speak up, and you can recognize them if you feel comfortable doing that.
Okay, that's great. And then how are we handling any questions that come in from,
We'll just
do I have to go up there and chat with
I
them?
won't make you do that.
Okay.
Let's see. Got here. Okay, so far, nothing, so I guess Marilyn, you can go.
Okay, great.
Yes, well, with all of the services that you are providing, does it matter at all where the headquarters of the Space Force is located?
The U.S. Space Force?
Yes.
No, it wouldn't matter, but it certainly matters to me, being a Colorado Springs resident. I want to keep U.S. Space Force, and I want to keep U.S. Space Command. I was an original member of this. We used to call it Space Command at the beginning. Then it became Air Force Space Command. Then we broke out and had U.S. Space Command in addition to Air Force Space Command. And at one time, I wore 3 hats here: NORAD, U.S. Space Command, and Air Force Space Command. And I had a leather jacket that had Velcro patches. I had 3 offices, and I could put my NORAD patch on when I went to the NORAD meetings. I put my U.S. Space Command patch on when I went to U.S. Space Command, and I had an Air Force Space Command. General Dick Myers was our 4-star at that time, and then followed by General Ed Eberhardt, who's back in the Springs now. And so I was their communicator, command and control person, so we were the only 2 people that had all 3 commands. But why I mention that is because over the years, we really built a tremendous capability here in the Springs. And I would like to see us keep that here, all of that Space Force, Space Command. I think there's a lot of synergy that there's talking at Peterson Air Force Base and in all the other, Schriever Air Force Station, Cheyenne Mountain, all of those places. There's great synergy that comes from that. So, yes, sir, Sky.
One of the very interesting presentation, and it's really nice to see kind of what's happening here. You a couple times referenced the Russians and Russian involvement, whether it's in elections or supporting a whole host of private individuals who want to do this. What is your sense of how much of this kind of activity, all these 4 categories you were talking about, is, I'm going to call it state-sponsored, maybe too strong a word, state-funded, state-encouraged, as opposed to individuals who could do this totally on their own? Because a lot is being made about it's the Russians' fault or the Chinese or whatever, and how much of it is just individuals?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I never have thought about the percentages, but I would say that in the past, nation-states, nation-sponsored activity was always the most sophisticated and the most dangerous. But I think the dynamic is changing also, because people are finding, as individual hackers or dark web organizations, they're gathering so much information and sophistication themselves, and they're finding through like cybercrime and through ransomware that they can get very rich very quickly. And of course, cryptocurrencies didn't help because they asked for the ransom to be paid in cryptocurrency, and which supposedly you can't follow. But one of the ransoms paid here this last year, there was money that was gotten back, even though it was cryptocurrency. So never underestimate the capability of our nation at what we can do in operations in cyberspace. That's why I wanted to give you the quotes of people who say, we've now gone out of criminal activity into national security. This ransomware has now become the #1 cybersecurity threat to us right now. But it's hard to put a percentage on, but I would say, even for the example of the Russians, they know what's going on outside by the hackers and everything that are doing their will, but they can always say, no, it wasn't us, you know. And so this is just, you know, it's using words, it's lying, it's all that. So, but there's a growing number of nations that have tremendous capability. The Chinese, for years, for example, have been known in the espionage area, in the data theft. I mean, they stole information from our most sophisticated 5th-generation fighter aircraft years ago because they gained access through a third party into the major organization that was building those aircraft, and were able to steal a lot. And that goes on every day. Because you're only as strong as your weakest link of who you're connected to. Let me give an example. Target. When Target was attacked years ago, and they stole, it was 140 million credit cards and all. You know how they got in? They found that there was an HVAC company for heating and air conditioning up in Pennsylvania that was connected to Target, and there was invoicing and billing going back and forth. There was a connection. So the hackers got into the HVAC and then rode the line of the invoicing and bill payment into Target, and were able to get into the Target data system, and were able to steal all that information. So it's not only what's inside your organization, it's who you're connected to. And I'll tell you, when I was at Deloitte, we found organizations that thought they had maybe like 3,000 connections that we needed to check. And we ended up, when we counted them up, it was 30,000 connections with outside activities and organizations. So it's pretty sophisticated, but to answer your question, I think the individual hackers and teams of hackers and dark web activists are getting more and more sophisticated, more bold, and so that's a growing problem. Sure, Kate?
Yes. Thank you for your service, first of all. And secondly, at the very beginning of when cybersecurity started becoming a focus, the biggest challenge, at least according to Richard Clark, who I worked with at one time, he said was getting the private sector cooperation, that information sharing, which now you and your group is trying to do. Would you say we've made real strides, or is that still a big obstacle?
We've made major strides in getting organizations, activities, individuals, but the threats continue to get more sophisticated, more numerous, and so we continue to try our best at getting people to learn more about cybersecurity and protecting themselves. You know, as we take a look at major organizations, large organizations, they can afford cybersecurity experts who right now come out of college at 6 figures. So if you have children and grandchildren who are looking for a career, get them into cybersecurity. They'll never regret it. You can go to whatever level you want. The sophistication has increased so significantly that going against these folks is just more and more difficult. So anyway,
But they're a lot more willing to share information than they were in the past. A lot of banks won't even say anything.
yeah, I've worked with Capitol Hill on draft legislation since 2008. And matter of fact, we started on the House of Representatives side, the Cybersecurity Caucus of congressional members who were interested in cybersecurity. It spread over into the Senate side. We tried legislation. A lot of times people don't want to have legislation because it's regulatory and it costs a lot of money. So larger organizations can afford the cybersecurity experts on their staff, or they can hire consultants. We have so many small and medium businesses throughout this nation that can't afford that kind of in-house expertise, or to hire it to be done through consultants. And so as I worked, one of the things Christian mentioned is that I work with the state of Ohio. That's my home state. And I started there with Attorney General Mike DeWine, and then he became Governor Mike DeWine. So he asked me to be a cybersecurity advisor 10 years ago or so. He came back as Attorney General, and he was thinking about running for governor. And he said, Harry, he says, the thing is, as I travel around, it's the small and medium businesses that are begging for help. They are literally begging for help. They don't know what to do. They don't have the resources, to do this, and the knowledge. And so, frankly, that's sort of our National Cybersecurity Center. We're more approaching the small and medium businesses with giving them a place to call and education that goes out. We're trying to educate the K through 12 people, K through 20 people, give adults, seniors, a fighting chance in today's world. And so people have the different activities and organizations have tried to give information. I can tell you that we stood up Department of Homeland Security with an organization there that was supposed to be an intermediary between federal government and industry, because industry didn't want to communicate directly with federal government activities. There was a trust factor there. And so Department of Homeland Security and the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Center there, CISA, is the one that kind of emerged over time to gather information from industry and to share it with government, and government to share information, clean it up, take all the classified out, and then share that with industry. And there's been success pieces of that, but it all boils down to who do you trust? And there's been a trust factor that has prevented over the years people wanting to share the information, because it started out great, share the information, but if you don't get anything in return and you're just giving and not getting, that's what caused problems. Now that's where the ISACs come in. Over the years, there's been very successful information sharing analysis centers in different industries that provide information in, and then it's provided back out. And if there's a good sharing and good relationship amongst the members, then it'll be a flourishing ISAC. If there's an ISAC that people just want to take instead of give, then that becomes a problem with trust. And so that's been sort of a central theme also across the nation in all kinds of ways. And of course now with the sophistication and the extent getting so much bigger, and ransomware was a thing in the past, but it was never like what it's grown to be in the last 2 years, of which I gave you examples, and it's going to continue. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, you described the vulnerability of small and medium-sized businesses as in very stark terms. My question is, I think that, is it also the case that to provide them with, to cover their cost of prevention against ransomware might exceed the cost that they would experience from a ransomware attack? And how do you balance those things?
That's a great question. How do you balance, giving service to small and medium businesses? And I'm repeating this for the folks that might not be able to hear. I'm not sure how good the sound system is for those out in video land. But how do you balance, the ransom that is requested versus trying to provide training, education, resources? I think that's the question you're getting at. That we're kind of at a cross point now, and I mentioned that a little bit in my talk. Is that I mentioned about Baltimore. The ransom was $100K, and they ended up paying $18 million. And so the federal government now is starting to realize that it's just not don't pay, that in some of these areas it's better to just pay. And so they have now formed 60 different organizations into a ransomware working group at the federal government level, and they're pulling in different folks to discuss what's the best way to deal with these kind of issues. And frankly, we now have Chris Inglis, who I've worked with for years, Air Force Academy grad, by the way. Thumb went up, and Chris was the Deputy Director of National Security Agency for a number of years, was at Department of Homeland Security, and now President Biden has chosen him to be the Director of Cyber for our nation. And Chris has some great ideas about this, and they're taking on ransomware problems personally. And if there is to be like a federal funded program or state funded program to help small and medium businesses, I think everything's on the table now, because this is it's such a difficult problem. But stay tuned, because there's a lot going on now. As a matter of fact, the president also has asked 30 different nations to get together to discuss the future of cyber globally.
For which the Russians have decided not to attend.
Yes, I hope they're not invited. There's an old saying, to keep your enemies, or keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. I'm not sure I agree with that one in that case. So they already know enough about us inside. So, any other questions? Yes, Kate. All right, a return.
Do we have a national policy or definition of when a cyber attack crosses the boundary into war?
Crosses the boundary of what?
Into war.
Oh, into war.
So
Well, I
we would
think
declare it a declaration of war, and then of course you have other things that flow from that.
for those who might not have heard the question, do we have a policy for when cyber attacks cross over into it could be a declaration of war? A couple things come to mind. First off, what I mentioned in my talk, the fact that now we have national level leaders who are announcing that criminal activity in cyber has now, in many cases, crossed into national security considerations. When they're attacking your nation, when they're attacking your critical infrastructures, and we have 16 critical infrastructures that I mentioned. But also, there were some attacks, and if you've ever worked with NATO, they have a Title V provision that an attack on one is an attack on all. And so a number of years ago, I think it was 2007, the nation of Estonia was attacked by the Russians. They were a very digitally sophisticated nation. It just brought them to a halt. And so whenever there's attacks in the cyber domain, even with like NATO or other alliances that we might be part of, there's usually a provision there that an attack on one's an attack on all. Now, a declaration of war could be a cyber war. As a matter of fact, most people think that any type of war will start with cyber. It'll start with an attack on critical assets, blinding our satellite systems, attacks on infrastructure. It would be a really terrible thing. And I wrote a paper with Ambassador Mark Grossman. Did you hear that, Scott?
Yep.
Ambassador Mark Grossman and I wrote a paper a number of years ago because we always talked about weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, chemical, biological warfare weapons, ugly, ugly things. And the paper that Ambassador Grossman and I wrote was, there's a new WMD, not weapons of mass destruction, but weapons of mass disruption. And I think we're getting to that point, but there's no policy on it yet. You still have to engage brains on, and human, discussions on how serious a threat is, but I think there's a lot of behind the channels discussion that goes on. I know years ago I worked with the East-West Institute, and I worked directly with the Russians and the Chinese in bilateral ways, and with other nations of the world. With the Russians, we were talking by each other on even what cybersecurity meant. So the first thing we did was we put together terms of reference, and we defined 20 terms. On one side of the page was the US translation of what cybersecurity meant. On the other page was the Russian translation. I still have that document. We started with 20 terms, we went to 40 terms, we went to 60 terms. We could hand that to our State Department so that they could then start discussing, more appropriately, what constitutes war, and those types of things. I worked with the Chinese, in their area. And we also talked about simple things like, what areas are off limits? Just like in war, you have, if you see a building painted with a red cross, that's an international sign that it's a hospital. Don't attack it, it's off limits. We also have always said in ways that you don't attack somebody's economic system. But do terrorists follow any of that? Matter of fact, that's probably the things that they're going to go after. That's their list, of how to make terror. So it's not clean, on how cyber threats are going to continue to come at us over the years. Yes, weapons of mass disruption could be very much lead right into a real war, but most people are thinking cyber will come before kinetic. Still have some time left.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Recently, an individual in the Pentagon resigned, and he announced publicly that the Pentagon's DoD cybersecurity was at the kindergarten level when compared to the Chinese, and he used that as part of his resignation. And do you have an opinion that you can voice about the real status of the DoD and cybersecurity?
Yeah, and I think he was taken out of context a little bit. I think he kind of tried to explain afterwards that our program is not a kindergarten program when compared to the Chinese. I think what he was really very frustrated about, frankly, and I haven't read great depth. I'm actually going to be doing a program with the America's Future series where we're going to be interviewing him and having discussions here in a month or so. But I think what he was really very frustrated about was that he was identifying what improvements needed to be done, what software needed to be purchased, what resources needed to be put into our capability. And he was frustrated, frankly, with the budgeting system. Because putting together, continuing resolution, we got all these different things now that are pulling at the budget, and a lot of funds going to different things. But he was frustrated that he couldn't get some of the basic funding to fund the things that he had thought long and hard about that would help us. And I think that's where he was, my feeling is, he was implying that we were kind of at a kindergarten stage, because you'd probably put that before the PRC or the Politburo, and they'd probably say, give it, and give 20%
Well, our
more.
budget system is.
Yeah, and so a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the foot, and I think that was his major. I think that was his major frustration, was that. But you asked me what our program's like. I put our program against any of them. I think we're number one.
Thank you.
And there's a lot that you won't read about, you may never hear about, but it's there. So
Thank you.
I'd rather be here than any of those other places. So with our cybersecurity program. Yes, sir.
A cybersecurity incident occurs anywhere in the world or in any corporation in the United States. How then does your National Security Center get involved with this? What lines of communication are there? And what's your role then in helping to determine the nature of that incident?
Sure. Our National Cybersecurity Center is young. We are growing. Probably threats against the space community would come to us fairly quickly, because that's part of the charter and the mission of the space ISAC. It's to gather that kind of information, discuss it among those organizations. By the way, we're building a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility for those who might top secret and above information. Discussions can take place in there at the top secret and higher level with our members who have those clearances. But as you know, we can then take out the techniques, the procedures and all that, and come down to facts, not how we got it, but it can be distributed among the space ISAC community. That's why people actually pay a membership fee to get that kind of service. In the education area of the NCC, it's really our professionals, like Forrest, keeping up with what's going on out there. I get feeds every day of all of the news items in cybersecurity that take place, and there's healthy ones every day, and I pass it to our cybersecurity experts. So we're trying to educate as best we can to the population. So that's foundational level. We're trying to pass that on even to state legislators as national type information. We don't get into classified information being disseminated. And of course that's where the real crown jewels are, but I've been there, done that, but we're trying to help even the basic level. In our cyber hygiene programs, for example, if people adhere to what we teach them in cyber hygiene, 75% of the cyber successful intrusions and attacks would be prevented. Now that's pretty good, 75%. But I also have hired individuals to sit on our board. We already had a very impressive board of directors. But recently I've I've hired as one of our board members a person that was CIO, Chief Information Officer of OMB, Office of Management Budget, Federal. She was also the CIO of the Department of Energy and CIO of Department of Homeland Security. Okay? We brought on a person who was the Chief Information Security Officer who worked with me in government in cyber, but he was Chief Information Security Officer for 11 years for USAA Insurance Global. How many are USAA members? You got Gary's expertise for 11 years. Now he's with us on our board here at the NCC. We just hired retired Major General Kim Kreider, who was the Chief Data Officer for the United States Air Force, Global. And then when General J. Raymond became Air Force Space Command Commander and then U.S. Space Force Commander, he brought General Kreider in to be his Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. General Kreider retired, she's now on our board. And I have somebody that I can't announce yet publicly, but she is very well known throughout the entire intelligence community for her technological expertise and all. And you'll see an announcement about that in the paper in the January timeframe. So what we're trying to do, we're building the expertise. Our board members, by the way, just don't come to quarterly board meetings, put their feet up on the table, light a cigar and say, next chart please, you know, and walk out. Our board has been described by the internal board members as a working board. And believe me, they're involved. And most of these people are senior, highly respected and regarded experts. And you know what? They're patriots, and they're trying to do the best they can for our nation. So it's a very exciting place to work right now because of all this expertise. Not only with our younger people, with our mid-range people like Forrest, who's leading our programs and putting it all together, but also with this dynamic board membership that we have. And they bring their ideas to the table. You know who our chairman of the board is? Mayor Suthers. We have Governor Polis, we have Senator Hickenlooper, we have Christian Anschutz, Kyle Hibble. You know, those types of individuals are on our board. So it's a pretty active, very well-connected, very experienced, hardy board. And it's a thrill just to be with them. We got more coming. I hope that got to your question. We're growing into our shoes of NCC. We were, Governor Hickenlooper was fortunate enough to, when he said back in 2016 or 17, what are we going to call this thing? And he said, how about National Cybersecurity Center? Check to see if anybody's got that. They didn't. We got it. It's ours. So you may see National Cyber Security Operations Center some places, or something like that, but the NCC is ours, right here in Colorado Springs. So there was something else I wanted to mention along those lines too. I forgot my train of thought there. I might think about it. So, anything else? Still have a couple minutes before your parking meter buzzes out there. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for a very enlightening presentation and follow-up. I'm just wondering what kind of budget you are operating under with all the range of activities that you have. Sounds like you really need a little army of people working within the organization. It is a great organization. And I drive by Nevada and see this little dinky building, really,
Right.
and thinking that all of this is happening there. How come? So I'm worried about whether you are adequately funded, whether you have enough staff that sort of supports the organization.
We don't, thank you very much. The question for those on Zoom is, what about our staff? Are we large enough to do the kind of things we need to do? No, we're not. We probably have about 15 employees. 15. And we're doing an awful lot. I'm so proud of these people and the hours they put in and the dedication they have. Somebody asked me one day, they said, Harry, what's your goal for the NCC? And I said, I guess a 3-phase goal. Number one, to become recognized as having quality products and services and expertise. You gotta have value, and we work on that to make sure that, and that's why we also stay apolitical. Number two, I want to bring revenue in. And so there's various ways that we can bring revenue, and we have new ideas that are frankly coming very dynamically from our board members who are putting together some new alliances with national level leaders and globally recognized industry. And that will bring revenue in, because small and medium businesses, back to that question, they will be able to subscribe in at a modest cost to getting information and all from what we will put together and publish. And besides becoming valued and recognized and good product and services, the revenue generation will allow me to hire people. And my goal is to get us up to about 50 people. And when you think about 15 people today, believe me, we're getting help from all kind of other organizations and activity. UCCS, we are partnered with them. And so we get lots of support there, and from our board members, as I mentioned. So we've got that going for us. And now I just remembered that last part I couldn't remember earlier. I mentioned that we had, we just kicked off a Colorado Cyber Resource Center, and I put a chart up there about that earlier. What we want to do is we're using Colorado Cyber Resource Center as a pilot program to build our foundation and expertise. And what we want to do is take Colorado out and put National Cyber Resource Center in. And that will fit perfectly with the National Cybersecurity Center, because we will then operate the National Cyber Resource Center. So we're thinking going national. We're 3 years old, we've launched, and frankly, I'm very proud of even the things we're doing today are remarkable. So, but we have growth in our program. And by the way, it's just not to hire people. I want to hire high-paying job people. I want to hire STEM experts. Those people and have high-paying jobs. Frankly, that's for a couple reasons. First off, to just raise Colorado Springs up to being, a technology-focused activity and city. But also to just build that expertise, that level, and to keep them from going elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's got to be at the base of any CEO's mind these days. You got to pay people to keep people, especially in cybersecurity. And there's a growing number of other occupations today now that fit that bill, as we read about daily. Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much.